morning. Lovely to see you all this morning. Please just allow you for a second to take your seats. And just before we begin, let me invite to join us on the stage our party leader, Alex Salmond. Welcome to Alba Party Spring Campaign Conference here at Hampden, and what a pleasure to see you all, and how wonderful to be in this iconic venue. Now, it probably goes without saying that neither the stadium nor the Scottish FA nor Scotland teams are in any way affiliated with any party, but we are delighted to be here, and in particular in the yes city of Glasgow. Now, I've got my eyes out, so let there be no walking on the pitch and no stealing of that turf. We're watching what you're up to. Now, there are no fire drills planned, so if the alarm goes off, just follow the signs as are indicated. And thank you so much for kindly those of you who are able to wearing your masks. We're very grateful to you to try and keep us all as safe as possible. Now, there's a cafe open downstairs all day, serving hot and cold food, tea and coffee, and it is licensed. I'm sure you'll be delighted to know. Yes, I thought you'd like that one. The speaker's cards. Now, sometimes you're all very naughty and you're wearing green, and can I let you away with it? If your name is on a motion, you need to put in a card to speak to it. If you're the proposer or a seconder or wish to speak to the motion. I can see some people raising cards in the air. Stewards, lovely dress in the Alba tie here, have the speaker's cards. So please pick one up for them and get them in as soon as possible. Now, this time on this very day, last year, the 26th of March, 2021, the Alba Party was launched. So happy first birthday to us. And just 1 year later, we're over 6,700 members. We have 6 committees: our National Executive, the Constitution Working Group, the Discipline Committee, Appeals Committee, Competence Committee, Finance and Audit Committee, all elected by you. And our candidates, well, we have 109. Just think about that. We've had one in-person national conference and one in-person spring conference and one in-person national council. We've had 2 online assemblies with huge attendance, bringing the independence movement together. And the next one will be on Sunday, the 3rd of April at 11 o'clock on the wee Alba book. This is quite an achievement for a new party. So well done to you all. And a special thank you to our wee but very effective headquarters team of Callum Ansell, Alexander Torrance, and of course our General Secretary, Chris McElhenney. And finally, and this is the first test, that first slide better be ready. I'm delighted to announce that we have our newly registered Alba tartan. Yeah! Isn't it gorgeous? And as soon as the first bale is woven, we can start ordering various items to wear. The colours are white and blue, intended to represent. Black is for strength and bravery. Light brown, representing gold, is intended to symbolise the sovereignty of the Scottish people. It was registered for us by David Main of Main's Highland Wear in Aberdeen, and it's been prepared for weaving by Locharan of Scotland. Now we have a packed agenda today which will be proposed for your approval, and in addition we've got 2 fringe events at 1 o'clock. The first one in this suite will will be the Women's and Equalities Forum with panellists Kenny McCaskill, Eva Cormie, Suzanne Blackley, Denise Finlay, Alan Peachy and Denise Somerville. And in the suite opposite, the Lomond Suite, we will have the Electoral Commission, who are offering a Scottish Council election surgery aimed primarily at candidates and agents for the elections, and will cover campaign and spending rules that you will all need to comply with, as well as key information about the nomination process and the counts. Speakers include representatives of the Electoral Commission and their Management Board for Scotland, and sandwiches and refreshments are available courtesy of the Electoral Commission. Can I remind you all, yes, it's popular in the front here, I know where you're going, can I also remind you that we have merchandise available at the back, particularly the Alba 2022 for the council campaign, and also the raffle, which we will draw later. The raffle, of course, is the highlight of our conference as opposed to the leader's speech. Anyway, finally, can I remind you of tonight's social event organised by Glasgow LACU and the wonderful Catherine McKernan. There are a few tickets left, and it takes place just a walking distance away at the Glasgow Indoor Bowling Club, and it's an evening of curry, the Glasgow way, which is the only way to do curry, karaoke, bowling and speeches with our deputy leader and many more. I've been told it's a cheap bar, whatever that means. Again, I think that's gone down well. Now, this is a campaign conference, and I'm delighted now to take this opportunity to call to the front here for a photograph opportunity some of your candidates at this election. While you're all assembling, so that's the queue, candidates, to start making your way to the front. I'm just going to read out some of the names while they're doing that, and we'll assemble for a photograph with the leader and deputy leader. So that's the cue to start making your way to the front. Aberdeen City candidates: Brian Allen, Charlie Abel, David Maitland, Robert Reid. Aberdeenshire, Councillor Brian Topping, Charlotte Cross, Colin Mackay, Ian Cameron, Councillor Lee Wilson, Trish McPherson. From Angus, Blake Sharp, Laura Tierney, Lisa Keogh. Argyll and Butte, Angus Files, Robert William McGowan. City of Edinburgh, Abu Merrin, Ann Todd, David Henry, Ewan McGlynn, Joseph Smith, Kevan Shaw, Leah Gunn Barrett. Yeah, clap, listen to the names. Clickmannanshire, Eva Cormie, Matt Riley. Dumfries and Galloway, Marion Collins. Dundee City, Councillor Alan Ross, Annie Jenkins, Alan Peachy, Heather McLean. Laura White, Scott Agnew, Cindus Camran, Thomas Byrne. From East Ayrshire, Guy Bola, Stuart McGlintock, Wendy McDonald. From Eastern Bartonshire, Alan Harris and Eamon McGallagher, they keep coming. From East Lothian, Hazel Hamilton, Michelle Gray, Morgan Davis and Paul Brown. East Renfrewshire, Amr Siddiqui, Dr. Carol Mackenzie, George Gebby, Neil Anderson. From Falkirk, Colin Todd, Scott Fallon, Zohaib Arshid. From Fife, I'm going to keep going as you keep coming. Colin Fraser, Craig Dempsey, Jackie Anderson, Jacqueline Bister, James Bryce, Leanne Turvett, Robert Thompson, Stephen Linus, Stephen Simpson, Susan Blair, William Gavin. From Glasgow City. Yes, Glasgow City coming up. Alexander Torrance, Angela Jones, Aziz Oyadeli, Catherine McKernan, Chigozi Oshichukwu, Farah Hamid, Mahmoud Ullah, Martin Olu Osanji, Mohammed Butt, Mohammed Shuaib, Ralph Suleiman, Tahir Jamil, Tony Ozi, Uche Mordi, Uduchukwu, Nawakorobia. From Highland, Elizabeth Maya, the Highland team, I can see you. Elizabeth Maya Chimongis, Murzi Nauska, Hector McLeod, James Duncan, Marjorie Smith. We're almost there. From Inverclyde, Councillor Chris McElhenney, Councillor James McElhenney, Louise Williams, Philomena Donaghy. From Midlothian, Andrew Coventry, Christine Laidlaw, George Boyd, Jamie Bryan, and from the Healing and Near, Councillor Callum McMillan. Just one more page to go. North Ayrshire, Jane Fraser. North Lanarkshire, Councillor Baird, John Marshall, Julie Marshall, Robert Slavin, Councillor Farouk. Perth and Kinross, Alan Black, Alexander Miller. Renfrewshire, Samuel Yerukin. From Scottish Borders, Yvonne Ridley. South Ayrshire, Denise Somerville, Eileen Spence, Jeff Bush, Sean Davis. South Lanarkshire, Colin McLaren, Ian Leckenby, Mohammed Kazema, Rita Bailey. From Stirling, Bill Cowan. From West Lothian, Gordon Dent and Hassan Mohammed. And that is it, your candidates.
everyone. We're doing a session tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody. If you can kindly make your way back to your seats. Hiya. Okay. Thank you very much indeed, delegates. Now we move on to the next item on the agenda. And as is always the case, wherever we take our conference, we invite a representative of that city or town to give us a big welcome. And with that, it gives me tremendous pleasure to welcome a Glasgow LACU representative, in fact, the organiser of Glasgow LACU, and our candidate for the Lynn Award to give us a welcome, Angela Jones.
Thank you. Good morning, conference. It is an absolute delight to be here this morning with so many friendly, happy, cheery people, all looking forward to the weeks ahead when we are going to be rushed off our feet. Glasgow itself is a yes city. We were the second yes city, I was reminded again this morning, only because the first yes city has a smaller population than us. So that's the reason we were second. We are really delighted in Glasgow. We have over 800 members and supporters ready to pound the streets in Glasgow for our 15 candidates that we are actually putting forward in this election. We have got candidates who are new Scots. We have got candidates who are old Scots. But we all have the same passion and we all have the same intention to make Glasgow a better place for every Glaswegian, whether they're new or old, and to intend to get Scotland to become an independent country, through Alba as a party. So all I'm going to say is thank you all so very much for attending this morning. And just as Mina's already mentioned, we do have a fantastic curry evening this evening. Please, if anyone is staying and hasn't yet got tickets, grab me or any of the LACU exec and we'll get you sorted. You don't want to miss it. Thank you.
A popular candidate there. Just going to check this mic is on. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Angela. Now I'm going to pass over to our Deputy Leader, Kenny McCaskill, to chair the next session, which is a conference committee report.
Well, I just simply hand back to Tasmina, who is going to be giving the conference committee reports. And if there are any questions or whatever, then clearly they will be taken.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Kenny. I'm delighted to present the conference committee report. There are 4 members of the National Executive Committee who are elected at National Conference and appointed by the NEC to serve. And they are myself, Eva Comrie, Corey Wilson and Josh Robertson. And 6 were elected at National Council. They are Gail Hendry, Jacqueline Bister, David Henry, Joan Savage, Heather McLean and Morgan Davies. We have met twice over Zoom and have corresponded and taken decisions over email. We received around 25 motions for today, 11 of which appear on today's agenda, and a further 3 topicals have also been accepted as of this morning. Accordingly, conference, if this report and proposed agenda is accepted, we will debate and vote on 14 motions, including Alba Stands for Scotland, Alba Equalities Plan, Protecting New Scot Citizenship, Health and Wellbeing Census, Travelling Communities, the Housing Emergency, It's Scotland's Energy, Council Tax, Minimum Income Guarantee, the Mental Health Act and Free Fair Public Transport. And the topicals are on the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, women and girls, and the Wee Alba book. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say a huge thanks to all members of the party for their participation in submitting motions to conference, some of which will be heard at National Council. And also I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow committee members for their hard work, their attendance at meetings, their consideration at all times for member and candidate opportunity to debate important issues, and above all, their determined commitment to Scottish independence. So with that, I propose our agenda be approved by conference. Thank you.
I don't think there are any cards in or questions, in which case I will just hand back to you, Tasmina. That's nice and easy.
What that means, of course, delegates, is we have a conference. So let's get started. Now, I'm sure you, like me, enjoy very much watching our Westminster representatives in the House of Commons speaking up for Scotland and speaking up for independence for Scotland. And with that, I'm really proud to invite to address us this morning our Westminster Group Leader, Neil Hanvey.
Hi, good morning, conference. Thanks very much, Tasmina, and thanks to everyone for coming along to this exciting and first year conference. I want to start my remarks today by paying tribute to all of you, to every Alba member, to every Alba supporter. You are the people who won't be swayed or fobbed off with excuses, and together, each of us has a story that has led us to stand firm for the cause of Scotland's independence. And our journey to Alba may have been painful, but ultimately it's brought much needed hope, not just to us as individuals or as a group, but to the wider independence movement, because it's given us an opportunity to rebuild the movement and to put our best steps forward in a positive way. And in that first year, and we've heard some comments about this already today, we have developed an impressive policy base. And as the conference agenda today illustrates, we are tackling the challenges that Scotland faces. We're addressing the health and well-being of our country. We are setting out Scotland's enormous potential and we are doing everything we can to protect the equality of all of our people. Now, others may try to drag us down and drag important voices in the movement down, but we're determined to get the band back together again and unite voices from across the movement. And so voices such as Stuart Campbell, Robin McAlpine, Ailsa Gray, Richard Murphy, Craig Murray and others have all participated in the development of the wee Alba book. Now that is an important document, as I'm bilingual, Alba and Alapa. That's an important document for a number of reasons, but for me, it's really important because it's a new statement of our intent as a nation, an illustration of what is possible, and it sets out the potential of a better independent Scotland. Now, I've met two principal types of people in politics, people who want to do important things and people who just want to feel or have a need to feel important. Now, that need to feel important can lead to strange things like the denial of reality itself, but doing important things requires discussion, debate, and collaboration. And I believe that's something that we have rediscovered in Alba. A year ago, Alba planted the standard to progress our cause, and that's why I'm here and convinced more than ever that I'm in the right place and I'm with the right people. We are here for independence, and we will never give up. A couple of weeks ago, I countered the ongoing timidity and confusion of the SNP over their alleged 2023 referendum plans. Now, democracy cannot forever be put on hold. The situation in Ukraine is abhorrent and it's inexcusable. And the historical genesis of it, whilst it's important, is not really a discussion for now. But our movement has always been anti-war and pro-peace. And that's best illustrated, I think, by the Bairns Not Bombs message. Yet stating the case for diplomacy in the Commons saw me booed. Now, you may have seen those boos coming from the Tory benches, and that might not be surprising. But it's very sad to tell you, I'm very sad to tell you, that those boos started and were led by the SNP benches. Now, an illegal war is an illegal war, and the accounts of war crimes in Ukraine are abhorrent. But we can't ignore Iraq. We can't ignore Tony Blair and the war crimes in that campaign. And surely there should be a consistency to such outrage. And tomorrow I will be joining others in London to celebrate the wedding of Julian Assange and Stella Morris. It's a great honour, but it's also a very real tragedy that Julian is being punished for having the courage to expose the war crimes in Iraq. And whilst there are dark days abroad in Ukraine, there are difficult days here at home. Now, I'm going to focus my remarks this morning on three main areas: COVID recovery, the scourge of poverty and the cost of living crisis, and women's rights and protections. Now, for us to effectively recover the health and well-being of our population, we need a functioning and funded NHS, and that's only safe with independence. To have a comprehensive cancer recovery programme and a long COVID plan, we also need a robust 10-year strategy. We need a nimble and flexible whole virus vaccine, such as the one being developed by Valneva. And we need to harness artificial intelligence tests that will enable us not just to deal with COVID, but a whole range of different viruses that we may face as a threat in the coming years. But those innovative life science developments are being ignored, not just south of the border, but also north of the border. And the poverty reduction and economic prosperity is an essential strategy for COVID recovery. But the Scottish Government's recently announced 10-year strategy lacks ambition, vision, and is devoid of any plans for independence. It leaves Scotland to the will and the whim of Westminster Tories, and it just won't cut it. Now, last week, the Chancellor, the week just passed, the Chancellor had his work cut out for him with his spring statement, because he was having to deal with not just the the challenges of the pandemic and the situation in Ukraine, but he was having to deal with 12 years of Tory austerity, insecure employment, his own targets for borrowing and debt, and they all constrained his options. But he could not have done a worse job. He ignored the poorest in the society completely. Poverty is a political choice, and this week he proved that that was a choice he was prepared to make. The Resolution Foundation predicts that inflation will hit over 10% for the poorest in society, and the biggest annual fall in household income since the 1970s. And more will now turn to food banks. But as the gap between the richest and the poorest gets ever wider, we have to wonder who is going to fill the stocks in the food banks, because poverty that was trickling up is now cascading upwards. The just about managing are no longer managing. Tax keeps going up and cuts continue to bite. And I think back to the days of Thatcherism when we had double-digit inflation. I just get my water, sorry. Thanks. That's better. And mortgage repayments couldn't be met. Houses went into repossession, and those assets were transferred from people who were hardworking and struggling into the hands of the wealthy. And this Chancellor has absolutely ignored the poor and given a free pass to corporations with no windfall tax in sight. So much for the sunny uplands of Brexit. That can be no better illustrated than the P&O fiasco. And it demonstrates how a law-breaking business will take their lead from governments that act unlawfully and use the threats of international law-breaking for brinkmanship in negotiation. And last week, the reality of Johnson's Tory Brexit was visited on 800 employees of P&O when they were collectively and instantaneously sacked via a video call, which was absolutely shocking stuff. Now, there's been hand-wringing and north and south of the border over this, but precious little to distinguish the messages between their responses. Where is the outrage over workers' rights and protections? And where is the support for the RMT? Green free ports are the First Minister's latest Four Nations team up with the Westminster Tories. It's been dressed up as an effort to reduce carbon emissions and deliver jobs and investments, but it's just another ill thought out plan. The SNP claim that they seek independence in Europe, but free ports are completely contrary to EU policy and are viewed as a means for tax evasion, money laundering, and facilitating organised crime. And it's not the first time the First Minister's enthusiasm for Tory free ports has been thrust into the spotlight. Her decision to support this Tory policy runs roughshod over the SNP conference's rejection of free ports, just as P&O ignored their employees. SNP members' voices have been similarly dismissed. Green free ports give a green light to poverty pay and stripping of the rights and protections of workers. They effectively allow the offshoring of jobs onshore. Employment rights are not the only things being targeted, and this time, not by the Tories. Women and other sex-based rights and protections are under direct threat from a gender-obsessed First Minister. Women's support for independence is actively being undermined by self-ID. It is a shameless abuse using the support of independence for other purposes that just wouldn't get a look in otherwise. And the impact is happening day in and day out across the country. There's a group of women I'm currently supporting in Fife whose coffee mornings have been cancelled by Fife Council, probably unlawfully. And I need to protect their identity because they really fear an aggressive reprisal if they speak up. This kind of behaviour must be halted. And Alba are seen, bilingual, are seen as the only party willing to defend and protect such rights. We've had 7 years of inaction on independence. 7 years of seat warming in a palace where Scotland's voice is not welcome. No amount of amateur dramatics at Westminster will deliver the change Scotland needs. Alba is uncompromising. And our message is cutting through. They may attack us and ridicule us, and if we're no threat, then why the obsession? We all know the solution, and it's more urgent than ever before. So to voters in the coming local elections, I say this: if you really care about tackling poverty, you can vote for Alba. If you really care about protecting women's rights, then you should vote for Alba. And if you are passionate about independence and you want it delivered, then you must vote for Alba. So vote Alba number 1 in the local elections. Thanks everyone for your support, and thank you, conference.
Thank you very much indeed, Neil. We now move to motions. And why I ask the proposer and seconder of motion number 1, Alba stands for Scotland, to make the way to the stage. And in case you've forgotten who you are, I remind you, you are Councillor Lee Wilson and Councillor Jim McElhenney. Just a wee reminder about speaking times. Proposers of motions movers get 5 minutes plus a right to reply only if they're answering previous speakers' questions. And movers or amendments get 5 minutes, and all other speakers get 2 minutes. That's correct. All of that being said, can I ask you to kindly welcome to the stage Councillor Lee Wilson, who will propose the motion. As we all believe, Alba stands for Scotland. Lee.
There must be an election coming up. For the past 6 months, the membership convener, national organiser, and I have been leading teams to assemble our candidates, 109 in total. So we are now in a position to field candidates from Fraserburgh to Hawick, university students to veteran campaigners, Scots Asians for Alba, Scots Africans for Alba. This is a party conference that looks and feels like modern Scotland. We should be incredibly proud. But the enthusiasm we have generated should never be underplayed. Last week, I spoke to Councillor Callum McMillan, our stalwart in South Uist, and advised him we would be debating a motion on land reform. Now, despite having prior commitments in his croft in South Uist, he is now by planes, trains, and automobiles arrived here today. So, conference, by your applause, I think we should recognise that commitment. But the task for us is to translate the energy we have as a party to the wider electorate, to build a mass movement and to...
I'm going to ask you to hold on, Lee, because we all want to hear from you while the sound is coming back at us here on the stage.
Okay.
Sorry, Lee.
No problem. I'll carry on. The task for us over the next 6 weeks is to translate the energy we have as a party to the wider electorate, to build a mass movement and to show that we are the party of independence. We don't do that by expending time on what other parties are doing and attacking them, because, friends, the rank and file members of the SNP are not our enemy. We just have truck with the leadership that fails in its ambition for the people of Scotland. So let this be the election which finally prioritises independence for Scotland, because, be in no doubt, the Scottish independence bus is now driven by Alba Party fuel. And conference, this party will never shy away from independence or lose focus on the cause. To the naysayers who claim that now is not the time, there has never been a better time to secure Scotland's independence. More importantly, there has never been a more essential time. Conference, we have to ask, why is it that 1 in 3 Scots are living in fuel poverty in energy-rich Scotland? Why is it that we generate 3 times the energy we need, but our fuel bills are rising exponentially? Why is it we boast 4 of the top universities in the world, but we have not managed to close the attainment gap? Why is it that our pensions are among the lowest in Europe? We know the answer, conference. It is because we don't have the full powers of an independent country, and we are tethered to a union that actively works against our interests. The Alba Party will not settle for it. But while independence is essential to solve all of our social ills, there are steps we can take now, if only we had a plan that was radical, bold, and transformative. Alba's proposals to tackle poverty are far and away beyond anything, far and away more than anything the establishment parties are proposing. We would lift people out of poverty and give every child a fair start in life. We would make sure that no child starts a day by going to school hungry, and we would make a priority free sporting facilities for all, so that no child is priced out of activities so many take for granted. And finally, conference, we are putting the rights of women front and centre at the heart of this campaign. We're in the great city. We're in the great city of Glasgow, which has such a remarkable record of inspiring female leaders. People often credit Mary Barber, who so valiantly led the rent strikes in Govan, as being the first female councillor in Glasgow. But she was actually part of a wider group of councillors who were elected to represent Glasgow in the 1920s. Well, now, conference, we have an inspiring slate of female candidates who are planning to represent the city. Angela, Catherine, Chigozie, and Uchi, you will rock the Glasgow City Council establishment to its core when you're elected in May. This election offers us an opportunity like no other to restart the independence movement, to inject the urgency and ideas into the debate, to inch this great country ever closer to independence as an immediate priority. And that will shine on everything that we do. Alba stands for eradicating the insidious poverty that blights too many of our people. Alba stands for the protections of women's rights that have been hard won over many decades. Alba Party stands for independence. Conference, Alba stands for Scotland.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Lee Wilson. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Councillor Jim McElhenny to second the motion. And I misspoke when I said 2 minutes, it's 3 minutes, but you can have a bit more, James, if you wish.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, conference. Jim McElhenny, leader of the Inverclyde Council Alba Group, who's seconding this motion. Thanks to Neil for obviously speaking to the motion and taking some of our thunder. Well done. Conference, Alba stands for Scotland. Alba knows what an adult female human being is.
Yes.
Alba stands for and supports women. Alba stands for the fight against poverty and deprivation. Alba's 5-point plan is fundamental in this fight. Conference. This cost of living crisis will force millions of Scots further into despair. Shame in Westminster and the Scottish Parliaments for allowing this to happen. Scotland is energy rich in both natural gas and renewable electricity. A Scottish-owned energy company should be capitalising in these resources. Conference. After the first said no, I am pleased that my council, Inverclyde, have agreed with Alba's proposal to pay those on council tax reduction a £500 payment, which includes the Scottish Government's £150. Conference, we can and we must do more. Please support the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor McElhenny. Now, I have no further speaking cards in and no cards against. So can I ask if the motion is passed? So, have we got a card in? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Just give me a second. To this first motion? Yeah, are you speaking in favour of the motion? Yeah, come up. What's your name? I don't have the card here. Robert Reid, welcome Robert Reid to the stage. Sorry, Robert, beg your pardon.
It's okay, I'll forgive you. Hello, conference. It's fantastic to be here at our national stadium on the eve of an election campaign that can shake up Scottish politics. I hope that I will at least play my small part. I believe, despite a late flurry of applications, that I am Alba's youngest candidate at this election.
Yay!
And I'll leave it to you to ponder who the oldest might be. I'm not going to say any names. I'm standing for the Tillydrone seat in an old Aberdeen ward. It's a ward like many across Scotland that suffers from high levels of deprivation. It's unthinkable that in a resource-rich nation and a resource-rich city like Aberdeen, we can have people struggling to get by, living off food banks, wearing umpteen layers of clothes to bed because they can't afford to heat their homes. It's a national scandal. I've never wanted to pursue a career in frontline politics, and certainly not one this early on in my life. When I spoke to my LACU convener, I was informed that that we didn't have anyone to stand in my ward. And so that meant for the first time in my life that I wouldn't have anyone going into an election that I could be excited about voting for. And I thought that if I'm in that position, there'd be many more like me feeling the exact same. And look, in wards like mine, there's a real problem with turnout in deprived areas. People often feel that political parties are disconnected. Politicians don't speak for them. They don't listen. Their vote doesn't matter. They're all the same. And let's be honest, who can blame them? When we look to just Aberdeen itself, you have the Labour Party jumping in bed with the Tories just for a taste of power. It's quite incredible how far the mighty Labour Party have fallen. A party that was once meant to be the alternative to the Tories, well, not anymore. In Aberdeen, you vote Labour, you get Tory. We need to let them know that we aren't like the other established parties. I believe we have all the ammo we need to attack this campaign with our positive message about what we can do for our local communities and our country. The 5-point plan to tackle child poverty, the 5-point equalities plan that we discussed in just a moment or so, the council tax freeze and protecting single-sex rights for women, and of course, keeping pressure on the SNP to deliver an independence referendum and return our country to be part of the international community and an independent nation. So just finally, please, take that positive message out onto the doorstep. Ignore the gruff Twitter ramblings of unionists of unionists and people and the Pete Wisharts of this world. Close one there. So get out there, spread that positive message, and make sure people know that Alba stands for Scotland.
Well done,
Thank you.
Robert. Well done, Robert. Thank you very much indeed. I have another card in. You've sought to catch me on the first motion from Denise Somerville, who's a candidate in South Ayrshire who will speak in favour of the motion. Denise Somerville.
Thank you, Taz. Thank you, conference. I've not got as much to say on supporting this motion. 3 words in 3 small sentences. Safety, prevention and cure. Safety of our women and children for futures to come. A prevention plan for poverty, which is spreading like wildfire across Scotland. And the cure being independence. This is why Alba stands for Scotland. And please support this motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Denise. I have a card in for this motion. The motion wasn't detailed on it, which is why we weren't aware what it was for. From Sarah Sawyers for a remit back in relation to this motion. So I'm going to invite Sarah Sawyers to the stage. Can I ask Sarah, she makes her way up here, if she has a seconder for the remit back, which would be required for it to be heard. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, everybody, and what a pleasure to be with my indie family and know this is real family. This is a great motion, and the remit back is for one reason and one reason only. It's not complete. It's not complete because it doesn't include a movement that has got going very quickly and is getting off the ground faster than we can keep up with it, which has to do with putting the power back in the hands of Scotland's people. It has to do with excavating Scotland's written constitution. Right? There is a phrase, the unwritten constitution of the UK, and actually that is inaccurate, and many legal scholars will say it's inaccurate. We have a written constitution. It's just that it's written in all kinds of different documents. So what we've got is an uncodified document. But if you go and look up UK unwritten constitution, here's what you're going to find. You might find yourself up on the page of the British Library, which has a wonderful article about where the constitution exists, and it'll take you through Magna Carta, the Declaration of Parliament, the Bill of Rights, and then on to the present, without a single mention of Scotland having any constitutional documents. So what happened? How did the pre-Union English Constitution suddenly become the post-Union Scottish Constitution? How did we all become English and bound by conventions, which, by the way, people will say in terms of Scottish excavation of the Constitution, my goodness, that's ancient history, isn't it? I mean, why are you bothering with that? Let's deal with today's realities. Today's realities include something called parliamentary sovereignty, which says that Parliament is sovereign over the people, and 1 million people on the streets don't have as much influence as a corporate lobbyist. It's up to Parliament. That's parliamentary sovereignty. High Court ruled in 2016 that there was no requirement for Parliament, for the judges to listen to the electorate. Do you know Scotland had a very different system? And our ancestors, when they signed that forced marriage contract, and it was a contract, they put in a prenup. They did. They put in a get-out clause. The get-out was, and this was done, whatever you think of the Presbyterian Kirk, and I have Presbyterian ancestors going all the way back, they were worried that Scotland would lose her character, her judicial character, her religious character, and her constitutional character. So they made it a condition of the Union and the treaty that that constitution was upheld. Now, we've been excavating that constitution, and in very short terms, what it says is, it is a crime in Scotland to claim that a parliament is sovereign over the people. It is a crime punishable by forfeiture of power. It is a crime to attack human rights. It is a crime to attack the right to protest in Scotland. It is a crime to give money to your pals. It is without parliamentary oversight. It is a crime to use the law to go after your political enemies. So some of us, you may know about the SSRG and Alba and Salvo. Some of us are excavating those rights because when you get married, if you have a prenup and the other partner breaks the conditions of that contract, you've got a way out. And it's not a coincidence that we've been being told that our way out is get a majority of MPs in Westminster. Oh, no, it's not. Prove that most people, including those who are only passing through, want it. Oh, no, it's not. Because the map that the prison governors will give us to get out, the map that the abuser in the marriage will give you to get out is gaslighting. We have a way out. And that way out is to get the people of Scotland together, back up off their knees after the treachery and the betrayal and the centuries of abuse we have suffered, and explain you are sovereign in Scotland. You lend your power to any government and you can take it back, not by saying, oh, well, we'll vote in another party. You can sack them and you can replace them. So we are asking conference to send this wonderful motion back, and I wish we weren't, to include the acknowledgement that power in Scotland is vested in the people and that we need to support the movement that is looking to create that grassroots tidal wave that says to the whole of Scotland and the whole of the world and the international courts, this is our law. This is the crime that's been committed against us, and we will, thank you very much, be reconvening the Assembly of the People that was known as the Convention of the Estates, putting this government on trial, and when they are found guilty, sacking them. So please. I feel the same way about my country, and I feel the same way about you guys. So I'm asking conference to remit back this wonderful motion and have it include support for the movement to reclaim Scotland's written constitution. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. I have got 2 cards in to speak against the remit back, and I just wanted to remind conference that at our conference in Greenock, we did indeed pass a motion specifically in relation to the written constitution and the sovereign right of the people of Scotland. But I have 2 cards against remit back. First of all, Morgan Davies, to be followed by Neil Hanby. Morgan Davies, please, welcome.
It's rather difficult to follow such a wonderful speech and suggest that we don't vote for the remit back. The speech was wonderful. Who couldn't be moved by it? It was elegant, it was articulate, it was very well put. I'm sure we all agree with it. The problem with remitting back is that we are, as we said earlier, in a campaign. And there is a finite date to that campaign, and it's the 5th of May. And that's when we're going to ask people to vote for us. If we remit this motion back, then it won't get discussed until, I think, the next conference. And by then, we'll be long past the current election. The other consideration is that there are times when there is a lot we can say about the state Scotland is in and the need for what the Speaker said we need to do. But there are times when you have to be careful about saying too much. And an election campaign is one of them. We've already got 3 substantial parts to what is going to be a major plank of our campaign pitch, if you like, for want of a better word, to the electorate. Adding in, even if we were able to, in the time available to us, a 4th, and to start discussing in detail the constitutional issues and the reality of where Scotland is and the problems of an unwritten constitution and all that, and the fact that effectively we have been subjected to having an English constitution submitted, forced on us. And there's no consideration given to the differences between the Scottish Parliament and an English Parliament prior to 1707. I would urge you not to vote to remit back, because then the motion will be remitted back and it won't form a plank of our campaign for the local government elections, which is a shame because it was such a wonderful speech. But that's the reality. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Morgan. I now call Neil Hanby to speak against the remit back. Neil Hanby.
Thanks very much, Taz. There's not, I think, a word that Sarah said that I disagree with, but it is fundamentally an issue of timing and preparation. And so this is a campaign conference, and the purpose of this motion is to help us prepare our case for that campaign. Our ambition for independence is a core part of that, but the passion that Sarah has for this issue, and I've spoken to her about it, and I share that passion, is something that we need to nurture and something that we need to get absolutely right and crystallize, and it deserves specific attention and focused attention that is separate to our preparation for a local government election. Now, I think from the response that Sarah rightly got to that, I don't think this is going to be a difficult issue for us to progress separately. And I think it deserves the correct attention separately. And I think it's incumbent certainly on me and my conversations with Sarah about how we start to tackle this at Westminster and get our ducks in a row. I think it's it overly complicates our local election campaign if we start to build in issues that many people in Scotland haven't really grasped yet. And it's our job to help them understand the historical nature of the position that Sarah so rightly argues. But I don't think remitting back this motion to advance that conversation will help us in either way. I don't think it will help our local election campaign, and I don't think it's going to help in any meaningful way to us to advance the important issues that Sarah raises. So I'm speaking against the remit back, not because I disagree with Sarah, because I don't disagree with her. It's all about placement and timing. And, you know, I've made a commitment to Sarah already today that we will start to do some detailed work about how we advance this and explore our options using Westminster to help us understand our options. So I'm not in any way disagreeing. I'm not asking conference to disagree with what Sarah has said, and I'm not asking you to abandon the passion that you've so clearly expressed. What I'm asking you to do is just have an appreciation of the need to approve our Alba Stands for Scotland motion, to give our candidates the confidence to go into that campaign with those clear messages, but also that we've heard that message from you this morning, that this is something that you want us to give proper attention to. And I've taken that instruction very seriously. So please support the motion, and we will deal with the other issues separately. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. There's no more cards in. Councillor Lee Wilson, you have the opportunity for a right of reply. You may wish to waive that right of reply. I can't see you, so you can't catch. Sorry. Are you waiving a right of reply? Yeah, so we'll just now proceed to vote. Right, we're going to vote on, first of all, the remit back. Those in favour of the remit back of motion number 1, please raise your cards or hands. Those against? I think the remit back falls. Thank you very much. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? Thank you very much. Indeed, that motion passes overwhelmingly. And can I add my comments and commitment to the remarks made by Neil Hanby and the very eloquent speech made by Sarah Sawyers. Thank you very much for your contributions. Now's an appropriate time, given that motion was Alba Stands for Scotland, to ask you to please use social media to promote what we are doing today at Spring Conference, and use the hashtag Alba Stands for Scotland. And with that, we now move to motion number 2 on the agenda, which is the Alba Equalities Plan, which is to be proposed by, now I've got various different iterations here. It's going to be proposed by Lynn Sheridan, yes. Proposed by Lynn Sheridan and seconded by Farah Hamid. I think I've got that right. Thank you very much indeed. Lynn Sheridan, everyone. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. Conference, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Neil and Lee and Jim for stealing some of my thunder. I'll have a go at you later about that, but anyway. Conference, this motion to 5-point plan to address inequality. I don't think we'll have anything more important today to discuss than the absolute destruction that we are on the horizon of: families in poverty, children in poverty. And we need to recognise that as a nation, there is absolutely no need for us to be in this current situation. Conference, we could spend the whole day discussing the main points of the motion. In fact, as a party, I think that we should be bringing together the best minds in our country in order to produce a plan of action that works towards the ultimate outcome of the eradication of poverty in Scotland, an overhaul of our criminal justice system, and how we develop a person-centred health and social care system. But I've only got a couple of minutes, so I'm only going to be able to address 1 or 2 points. Conference, in their annual report on poverty in Scotland, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation in 2020 highlighted that in the period between 2016 and 2019, around 1 million people in Scotland were in poverty. 230,000 children, 640,000 working age adults, and 150,000 pensioners. And these figures from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation actually exclude the period that we're just coming out of in relation to the pandemic and COVID-19. The Scottish Government's own figures recognise that their policies and measures have not helped to push the number of children in poverty down. In fact, their own figures show us that children in poverty, the numbers have actually increased. And we are now, believe it or not, at a 5-year high in relation to those numbers. Well, Conference, I don't think that's good enough for our bairns in our Scotland. So, what we also need to recognise, Conference, is that things are going to get worse. The GFT report highlight the risk factors for children and for, in the majority of cases, women. And so they look at a child that's living with a family where there is no employment, within a lone parent family, or in socially rented accommodation. That the children within these factors are actually a really high risk. And these figures and risk factors do not include the eye-watering rises to gas and electricity prices that are coming our way. And the fact that inflation currently is at 6% and above in terms of inflation, or the cuts that have been made recently to universal credit. And we should also not forget the huge amount of people who are working full-time jobs, but they are low paid. They are within what we call the job insecurity sectors in terms of the, what is it they call it? The gig industry and stuff like that. The plight of seeing full-time qualified nurses having to use food banks, in my opinion, is an absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace. And then we saw this week, those of you that are on Twitter, a tweet about a 14-year-old young boy who fainted. He was at a food bank, had fainted, and the reason being that he was malnourished. We live currently within the United Kingdom, which is one of the richest nations in the world, and yet we are in the situation that we are in. Conference, I want to end my remarks on what's coming round the corner, and it's very noticeable that the government, the Scottish Government, have not made any mention of this currently in their manifestos, and that is the reorganisation of our health and social care system. It's going to have major impact on all of us, especially those of you who are independent or family carers. What the proposal will do is to lift all of the responsibilities for health and social care and social work and take it away from local government. So your locally elected councillors, whatever, will have no say in how you decide to prioritise services in your area depending on the demographic needs of your communities. So we need to be fighting to make sure that the policies that they're talking about introducing are fair and transparent. And I would ask you all to go and look at the alternative, which has been put forward and proposed by the Commonweal organisation, and you can go online and download their ebook. Conference, and finishing my remarks, I ask you to support the motion. These are just some of the issues that we need to address if we want to become a fair and just and independent Scotland. I move. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you very much indeed to Lynn Sheridan, and I now call Farah Hamid, who is a candidate in the elections for Glasgow, to second the motion. Welcome, Farah.
Morning, Conference. This is my first time speaking in front of an audience, so forgive me if I falter. One of the things that concerns me even as a child was walking around Glasgow. I used to tell everybody that why aren't we independent? We've got everything. We've got our own oil and gas. We should have our own country to ourselves. Why are we letting 50 million people dictate to us? Why are they making our decisions? You know, went through the Thatcher strikes, you know, taking away our oil and gas, school strikes, and we're going through this all again. And now I walk through Springburn and Rob Royston, and I'm seeing all this again. I'm seeing housing deprivation, food and fuel poverty. The elderly, they have no food. They're eating scraps off the table. It's beyond me. I mean, the baby box isn't going to cut it for homes either, or the £10 a week that they're going to get from the Scottish Government. I was told yesterday when I went to a parent and a toddler group that they were getting phone calls from I don't know who it was, but they've been told that the £10 has now been upped to £20 or £25 a week. So £20. So they're getting scared because of the local elections coming up, because we've promised them £40 a week. So one of the things I want to address is the education, because of the poverty that our Scottish people are facing, poor housing, food and fuel poverty, because we're not independent. how are we expected as a nation to rise? How are we expected as a nation to educate our children? The manifesto of the Scottish government was education first. How are we supposed to educate our children when they're going hungry? There's no school meals provided for them. So I think as a collective, we have a duty to provide for them. And the Equalities plan and with our 5-point plan together, a conference, I ask you to agree with the motion and support it.
Thank you very much indeed, and well done in your first speech, and good luck in the elections. You'll be a credit to Glasgow City Council. I now call to speak in favour of the motion, and I won't miss him out this time because I forgot him last time, Robert Reid. He's running from the back, Robert. Welcome, Robert.
Apologies, I thought you were going to ignore me again. That was...
But you were late.
Yeah, so good morning again. I was going to keep this one brief because there's been a lot of great speakers so far, and I don't think there's really much more that needs to be said, but because I touched on the kind of shocking levels of poverty and inequality in my ward and my community. So I wanted to give you a bit of perspective from the ground. I visited several charities in my city, and they've all done a fantastic job, and I think some deserve a special mention. Alba Necessities and Serenians. They provide unbelievable support to people who come through their doors. Children who don't even know what their own birthday are because they've never been able to celebrate it. Can you just imagine that? They provide birthday cakes, plates, jackets, prams, anything that mothers struggling to get by require. And in both charities have talked to me about the increase that they've seen through their doors over the last 2 years. They've seen a 900% increase since the pandemic started. And that wasn't starting from a low point. That was starting at points when pressure was high anyway. And a 900% increase over the 2 years with no sign of drop-off. It's quite incredible. We're coming to a point that really people, I think, will start to wake up and notice that something needs to change. So that brings me to kind of final remarks that please support this motion because it will go a long way to help those in my community and across Scotland to find day-to-day life a struggle.
Thank you very much indeed, Robert. And our final speaker, the wonderful person speaking in favour of the motion, Eva Comrie.
Thank you very much, Taz. I want to give you a wee bit of, well, a novel experience. Free legal advice. There's a reason why this motion is framed in the way it is, and it's obviously because it's a council election campaigning motion. But the importance of the motion arises in part from something that I know that Lynn Sheridan holds very dear to her heart, and it's the second line or the second paragraph of the motion where we say, "Conference reaffirms the promotion of social welfare as a public duty." And the reason why that's there and your free legal advice that you're about to get is this. In 1968, there was passed a hugely significant piece of legislation in Scotland, and it's called the Social Work Scotland Act 1968. It's still in force, and the preamble reads, "This is an act to make further provision for promoting social welfare in Scotland." That was in 1968. I was 5 years old. I'm 59. We're not promoting social welfare in Scotland now the way we should be. However, the preamble goes on to say, to consolidate certain enactments regarding the care and the protection of children, to amend the law relating to the supervision and the care of persons put on probation or released from prison, to restrict the prosecution of children for offences, to establish children's panels to provide children's hearings, and for purposes connected with the aforesaid matters. Now, Conference, if you regard the purposes and the demands in this motion, what you will see is that every single one of these 5 aspects touches on and has as its heart a responsibility or a duty of a local authority. So when some of you become elected as councillors and you find yourselves perhaps in a minority of one in a chamber with a motion supported by this party and by the strength of the people within this party, and you have opponents who tell you, as they told Alex Salmond and others many years ago, and I see Kenny McCaskill there nodding his head, "Oh, you can't do that." Aye, we are. Because in paragraph number 1, you'll see what we suggest is the promotion of the community supermarket. I urge you all to take a huge leaf out of the book of Pauline Gilgallen. She spoke at our Equalities podcast, which Tweet Street did. It's online. Watch it, listen and learn about the efforts that lady did, which could be replicated nationwide and relieve in a one-stop shop the poverty and the want of so many of our people. Number 2, talking therapies for adults recovering from addictions or seeking to overcome addictions. Again, those are services able to be provided and legally required to be provided by a local authority. Never forget that, and never let them forget it either. Number 3, a locally managed, nationally funded drive to end homelessness, with particular emphasis on those involved in the criminal justice system. Some years ago, when the first food bank arrived in Clackmannanshire, I heard a story that still reduces me to tears, and it was a man who came out of prison and had his mentor, if you like, to take him to the homeless unit and then up the road to the food bank. And apparently the guy couldn't get out of the car at either of these places and stared down at his feet because he was so embarrassed that he had no home and obviously no food, no resources, no nothing. And he had comment to the mentor, who was a man that I knew, a former police officer, that he might as well be back inside. I don't believe for a moment that that is anything like a solitary experience for thousands of people in Scotland today. But again, in our Inequalities podcast, you would hear Rona Hotchkiss speak very passionately about why we lock up the poor. Now, that penal system debate is a debate for another day, but what is hugely important and highly relevant is that on any given day in Scotland, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people in prison who ought not to be there, in part because they are not a danger to our society, and in part because they are the poorest and the most disadvantaged and the most vulnerable and the weakest in this country. And if we as a party are going to transform this country, we must start with the weakest, the most vulnerable and the disadvantaged. And our prisoners, particularly these days, our female prisoners, are amongst the hardest done by. So had we a system of bail hostels, then folk who go to jail on remand because they're homeless wouldn't necessarily need to be in jail. They could be outside being productive, being looked after, learning to recover from some of the addictions or the traumas that took them into the criminal system in the first place. Parents might not have to be removed from being able to care for their children or their other elderly relatives. So bail hostels and homelessness as regards people who've come across the criminal justice system would save lives, and it would save a hell of an amount of money and a lot of grief. And again, homelessness, you'll know full well, is totally within the remit of the local authority. Lynn's already explained about social care. The care system is currently within the remit of the local authority. And finally, financially, you'll see number 5 refers to children who have had a care experience and who are leaving care. To its credit, the Scottish Government obviously launched the Independent Care Review a few years ago. Unfortunately, the promise that the Independent Care Review has made is not being rolled out as quickly as it should be or as comprehensively as our children require. What we are proposing here in number 5 of our motion simply attempts, and I use the word deliberately, attempts to redress the balance for some children who were brought up in the care of the Scottish state and for whom we as a community must do far better. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Eva. I have no cards in against. So can I ask that motion number 2, the Alba Equalities Plan, be passed by acclaim? Thank you, Conference. We now move to motion number 3, protecting New Scots citizenship. I'm now going to have to be a bit more serious with the timings to make sure we get through all motions before we hear from our Deputy Leader at 12:30. To propose the motion, I'm delighted to call one of our candidates in Edinburgh, Abu Merin, to be seconded by David Henry, another of our candidates in Edinburgh. Welcome, Abu Merin.
Good morning, conference. I'm really delighted to be here today in front of all of you. As you all know by now, my name is Abu Merin. I'm a councillor candidate for Alba Party. My ward is Liberton, Gilmerton in city of Edinburgh. Before I moved to Morton Hall in 2017, I was an elected member of Lead Links Community Council. I was born in Bangladesh. After graduating from the National University of Bangladesh, I pursued further study in computer concepts in India. I also completed LLB preliminary. I obtained an MBA degree from the International University London Centre before moving to Edinburgh 21 years ago. Currently, I'm a community councillor for Liberton and District Community Council in Edinburgh, and I am self-employed. Conference. Today, I stand before you with personal experience and knowledge of traveling to and from United Kingdom. Until the changes in the law proposed by the Conservative Home Secretary Priti Patel, I had no concerns while traveling. With these changes in the law, granting sweeping powers to the Home Secretary, I and everyone will be in a fear of finding that our passport have been cancelled and entry to the United Kingdom is denied. This will be without our knowledge and with no legal recourse. The Nationality and Border Bill proposes to allow the British Home Secretary to have the power under Clause 9 of the bill to remove someone's British citizenship without having to give any notice, without any rights of appeal. Conference. While the UK was in the EU, every Scottish citizen had their human rights protected. However, following Brexit, those protections are no longer in place. We all are in a fear of losing our citizenship, fear to be apart from our family, fear to be apart from our beloved country, Scotland. This is no presumption of innocence. Conference. We demand the UK government remove the amended Clause 9 of the Nationality and Border Bill without any delay. We demand all Scottish MPs as MSPs to upholding all Scots' human rights. We demand that the Scottish government prevent the Nationality and Borders Act being enforceable in Scotland. Conference. For New Scots, for Old Scots, for us all, to live without any fear of losing any of our human rights, including citizenship. Please support this motion. Thank you all.
Thank you. Well done. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Abu Merin. I now call David Henry to speak in favour of the motion, to be followed by Cavan Shaw, who will also speak in favour of the motion, who is also one of our candidates for Edinburgh. David.
Conference. When Abu Merin contacted me as the secretary of the Edinburgh branch and asked me, he told me he had an important issue he wished to raise, and how could he bring it to the attention of the Alba party. So I asked him to send me details of this little known piece of legislation that's making its way through the House of Lords and the House of Commons, because I was unaware of it, as maybe many of you were. In particular, the Nationality and Borders Bill, and Clause 9 in particular, will give sweeping powers to the Home Secretary of the UK. One of those powers is they can remove any British citizen's citizenship without having to give you any notice. So here in Scotland, we are always been a nation that are law-abiding and believe in fairness. And that doesn't sound very fair to me. So the motion that we put forward stands for fairness and identifies that human rights includes citizenship. The Tories always wanted to get rid of the Human Rights Act. Now that we're out of the EU, they're free to do it. And that is exactly what they are doing. So I wanted to ask the audience, the conference, a show of hands who thinks that you might be at risk of losing your citizenship. Anyone think it could happen to you? 2 or 3? Somebody says they wish. Yes, but we can't give you Scottish citizenship, not quite yet. Okay, so not many think it could happen to you. Well, I've got a couple of examples for you. One example is, you may have heard of Edward Snowden, the man who exposed the Americans for their internal secrecy and data capture. They revoked his passport. He didn't know it was coming, but he happened to be in Hong Kong at the time. The news didn't get to Hong Kong quite fast enough because he managed to get onto a plane to Moscow. So by the time Hong Kong authorities found out he didn't have a valid passport, he was already in the air. So authorities can revoke your citizenship without you knowing it, and they can do it without a court hearing. Conference, the EU had human rights at its heart, its protection. Perhaps that is why the Tories have decided to act now. But I want us to imagine a fictitious Scottish family. We'll call them the Sturgeons. Okay, Mr. Sturgeon is a successful company director. His wife, Mrs. Sturgeon, is an administrator, and they have 2 lovely little children, Minnie Sturgeon and Maxie Sturgeon. They decide to go on a holiday to Spain. So they fly from Edinburgh. They have 2 weeks, all inclusive. It's going to be a wonderful time. The hotel's got a pool. They've got a pool, and it's all inclusive. The kids had lots of fun playing on the beach. Mrs. Sturgeon, she met lots of good new friends around the pool, including a Mrs. H. So,
David, of course, is over time at 3.5 minutes. But I do
I
feel
will
the conference
speed
wants
it.
to hear the end of the story, so I'll let him finish.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't time it. So it comes to the end of this wonderful time they've had. They've got to pack their stuff up, get the luggage, transfers back to the airport in Spain. They get onto their pre-booked seats. They've got inclusive meals. It's wonderful. They get to Edinburgh, of course. Edinburgh Airport. While they've been away, there's been a bit of a scandal. Apparently somebody with the same name is now deemed a threat to the British state. And they have had their citizenship cancelled. So they get to the airport in Edinburgh. They get their passports out. They go to the British border force. Mr. Sturgeon goes through, scans it, the gate opens, he's through. The Minnie and Maxie Sturgeons, they do the same, they go through. Mrs. Sturgeon, she comes to it, she puts it on the scanner. Oops, there's a mistake. She put it the wrong way around. She turns it round, scans again. Oh, no, there's a big red flashing light. So she doesn't get in.
5 minutes. You're at 5 now, David.
Okay. So I've got to rush to get it to the end. The issue is, she would now have lost her citizenship, all because of a computer glitch, because she shares the same name as somebody else. She didn't know anything about it, because they don't have to tell you. It's only where practicable. Her citizenship is over. She's now going to be deported back to where she came from. So while that's nice and funny, the act is not funny. Nationality and Borders Act, Clause 9, threatens all of our citizenship without us ever knowing about it. And it removes the presumption of innocence and the rule of law and access to justice. Scotland's better than that. Vote for the motion.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I now call Kevan Shaw, a candidate in Edinburgh, to be followed by George Gebby, one of our candidates from East Renfrewshire. I'm going to ask Kevan Shaw if he can kindly keep to 3 minutes. I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Good morning, conference. I think we've heard two very interesting speeches about this issue. I want to bring a more personal feeling to this. I think almost everybody here has stood outside an arrivals area waiting for friends, colleagues, family members to come through that gate. I can imagine what happens if your family member doesn't appear. You wait and you wait. Nobody comes through. You don't know what has happened. That person has lost their citizenship for whatever reason. And that has just been done. Nobody's been told. Nobody knows. And your relative doesn't appear. My partner is Japanese. Up to now, I have felt very confident when I've been meeting her from the airport when she's been to visit her family. Now I'm not so confident. I know I'm going to be standing there. I'm going to be worrying for as long as it takes for her to come out. And I fear that one day she might not because of this act. Think of that, please, folks. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Kevan. I now call George Gebby, candidate for East Renfrewshire, to be followed by our final speaker, Mercy Kamania. George Gebby, please. Thank you. Welcome. It's a long walk from the back of the hall. A bit of encouragement for George. Well done. You made it.
Now, today we got an iron lung I could use. Alba, Scots, friends, fellow party members. So I'd like to just say why I'm supporting very strongly this particular motion, because I am married to a new Scot who came here to Scotland over 30 years ago from what I'll quite clearly say was a more advanced country than the UK, and probably still is. She's from Sweden. So when she came here, she frankly thought it was a bit primitive and then devoted her life to working for the health service to make it less primitive, and is very proud of the progress that she's made with that in the 30 years that she's been here. We have 2 children, born in Scotland, dual nationality. And I thought I was marrying a foreigner and I was going to inject some foreign blood into my Scottish family. Well, my Scottish family decided, each of them now adult, that the future didn't lie in Scotland. Because after 2014, and after the conduct of the Scottish government thereafter, they came to the conclusion they were better in their mother's land than in their motherland. Now, this particular motion ties in with the other speeches that we've heard, particularly among the more passionate ones that we heard this morning. Because of all the great resources that Scotland has, the greatest resource of all is its people. And the greatest resource of any people are those people who are enthusiastically taking part in the community and society and supporting it. Now, I'm a Gebby, and my Swedish wife went into the ancestry of the family and discovered that although on my mother's side is a Douglas, hence the tartan, we've probably been here since Jesus left Partick, that the Gebbys only arrived in the 1600s. And shortly after they arrived, they were already, as immigrants, supporting Scotland. And indeed, one of my forebears, John Gebby, was martyred of his wounds fighting against the Crown at the Battle of Drumclog. And if you want to go and pay a pilgrimage to his grave, you'll find it in Newmilns Kirkyard. He was a descendant, a recent descendant of immigrants, fighting for his country, fighting for the rights of himself, fighting for his neighbours, fighting for a better life. And that's what people who move to new countries do. They come to make their lives here. And they are extremely valuable for that, because they certainly are not the people who take for granted the quality of life that they have. They value it, they understand how precious it is, and they wish to defend it, often more than the people who, after generation, simply grew up here. For me, ladies and gentlemen, friends, Scots, Alapanacha, this particular motion ties in with everything else. It ties in with the passion that we have for independence. Because I've lost my family from Scotland because we're not independent. That was a failure. There is clearly a threat to new Scots citizens under this Act. But there's also a threat to new Scots because we are not independent. All of this ties in together. Please support this motion and show your strength of support.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much indeed to George. And now our final speaker, Mercy Kamanya. Welcome, Mercy.
Hello, hi, good afternoon, conference. Thank you very much for this opportunity for me to come and defend this motion. As one of the person who have benefited from being an immigrant, I was born in Kenya, I was raised in Kenya, but now I'm in my country now. And so the thought of one day, the thought that one day somebody can come and tell me that I've lost the citizenship, it is not very good. I really don't think that the Westminster Parliament they take into consideration the impact of this kind of a decision, the impact it has not only into the people, but also into the country itself. We immigrants, we are seen as people who are just takers. People don't see us for what we bring, and we bring plenty. I'm here. You know, Scotland have adopted somebody like me, hardworking in my country, and I'm ready to give back. And they don't see that. They only see what you have come to take. So, conference, today we are going to talk about how we can be able to look into how we can come against this motion. The fear of leaving, not knowing where you're going, thinking that one day the UKBA will come and put you into detention and take away your citizenship is very daunting. Not to mention that our children are born here, they're educated here, including ourselves, and it does not put in consideration the investment that this country has put to educate us and how that is going to be a brain drain if they remove these people that they have invested here. And this is a country that is largely lacking manpower. We really need the resources of every person who is qualified in this country to stay here and work and invest and build the economy. This idea that today I'm here, tomorrow I'm where, I cannot even establish a route. And just like the last speaker was here, it is true, it affects our independence. Because how can I be able to even think about independence when I don't even know where I'm coming, I'm going? If I can think that maybe tomorrow I'm going to be uprooted, independence is not for me. I'll be thinking about, if I'm removed from here, where will I go? And that in itself, it makes us live a life of a double life. One leg is here, one leg is in Africa, or in Asia, or in wherever you come from. Because you don't know when the computer can say, oh, I don't need to be here. Not to mention the cost it costs the NHS. When you live like that kind of a fear, majority of us have really gone through depression. The depression that we went through the asylum system to begin with, some of us have not healed. We are still on medication. And this has costed the NHS a lot of money, not to mention the death of the people who have killed themselves. There are many people who used to jump in the tower block. There are so many children who are left orphaned, and all that cost was taken by the government by putting these children into care. She's she's telling me that my time is finished. But in Africa, we don't have time. We normally go, we normally go outside and look outside in the sun. I'll be 1 more minute. I'll finish in a minute.
You can just wind up now.
Yeah, I'm just waiting up. Yeah. So, conference, what I'm saying is that we really need to come against this motion because it is not fair on us. We have already established ourselves. We want to start thinking about how we are going to build our independence, how we are going to build this country, and how we are going to settle down here. A lot has been invested, our time, and for me to even imagine I would go back to Kenya as a returning wanderer is very, very. I would rather not go. I would rather go back in the back of a coffin, in the back of a plane, in a coffin, because where would you start? You don't have money. You have not been there for a long time. My children have never been there. It is not anything that we want to endure. So please, conference, I want you to support this motion. And we put an end to this diabolical idea that these people who are deluded are coming up with because it's not fair. It is not well thought through, and I don't know what they are thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercy. Thank you very much. There are no cards in against the motion. Number 3, protecting New Scots citizenship. Can I ask this be passed by acclaim? Moving swiftly on, looking at the time, to motion number 4, the Health and Wellbeing Census, to be proposed by Alan Petrie, as a candidate in Dundee, and seconded by Lisa Keogh, who's also a candidate. First, Alan Petrie. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, conference. My name is Alan Petrie, and I'll be standing for the Alba party in the East End ward in the Yes City of Dundee. Conference, I cannot believe that I'm up here standing, speaking on a motion about a Scottish government asking sexual questions of our children. That is disgraceful. What kind of government asks these kind of questions to children? Especially when the MSPs themselves refuse to answer the same questions. Conference, this is the behaviour we warn our children about being online. Predatory questions. We should not be having elected representatives asking our children these questions. And remember, conference, these answers are identifiable with the children. This will be on children's records for the rest of their lives. Prison records are only on people's records for 15 years. That is a disgrace. We've just gone through the worst pandemic in over 100 years. Children are stressed enough. They're worried about their exams and their future. We should not have a government putting more pressure on them, asking if they have broken the law by having sex. Conference, when I become a councillor in the East End ward, I will be doing every single thing in my power to stop these questionnaires from going out. If they have gone out, I will stop them from going to the secret third parties that are so interested in children's sex. Conference, there is children going to school hungry and going to bed cold because their families cannot afford to heat and eat. Why is this not a priority for our government? Why is asking them sexualised questions a priority? That is a disgrace. Now, I could just hear the SNP faithful saying, but we are mitigating the Tory party cuts, and there lies the problem. While we are in this union, we will always be mitigating Tory party cuts. It's time the government started to eradicate poverty, not maintain it, because the Tories are just cutting things. Now, I'd like to talk directly to the SNP supporters who are watching online, because we know that they're watching. We know that you vote SNP for independence, but it's your vote that the SNP are using to justify a mandate for this and many other things that they are doing, like removing safe spaces from women. On the 5th of May, you have the chance to send a direct message to Nicola Sturgeon. that you support independence. You do not support the woke policies of the SNP. On the 5th of May, vote Alba 1. Send that message to Nicola Sturgeon. Now I would like to address the Labour, Tory and Conservative Party who are also watching online. Our conferences are so popular. Over the last 5 or so years, your elected members have done nothing to stop these idiotic policies from the Scottish Government affecting the daily lives of the people of Scotland. You know the establishment are all in this together. It's now time for real change. It's time to put a party in place that will take on the establishment and defend the rights of the people. Alba have the experience, the determination and the will to defend the interests of the communities. Conference on the 5th of May, we have a fight on our hands. But Alba has the policies to protect women's rights, policies to protect our children, and policies to eradicate poverty. Conference, now is the time. Alba stands for Scotland. Now Scotland must stand with Alba. Support this motion.
Well done, Alan. Fantastic. Great stuff. Now I'm delighted to call our final speaker and seconder, Lisa Keogh, who's a candidate in Angus. Lisa had the temerity and audacity to say that women have vaginas, and we agree.
Hiya, thank you. I'm Lisa Keogh. I'm standing in Angus in the Arbroath, West Leckham and Freakham ward. I'm here to second Alan's motion. I've got young children in the Angus area as well. And my oldest son's school sent me, I opted out, not a lot of parents know you can opt out, I opted out of the wellbeing census, to which my oldest son's school asked me a further 3 times to opt back in. Obviously I said no. They sent me a list of frequently asked questions from parents. None of these frequently asked questions were, what are the questions in the census? They were like, oh, how long will my child have to fill in this form? Will it be done online? So I'd obviously emailed back and asked, what are the questions, to which I got no response. These questions are very personal. I wouldn't feel comfortable answering these questions, never mind a 12-year-old child answering these questions. It's ridiculous. A 12-year-old child should not know what anal sex is, should not be having anal sex, should not be having any kind of sex. They're innocent. So vote Alba and keep our children innocent. Yeah, I think so. Well, I knew you were running behind on time, so I didn't want to take up.
We wanted to hear more, but if that's your speech,
Yep,
Lisa,
I didn't actually prepare anything, so.
is that you want to finish?
Yeah, that's
well
me
done,
done.
Lisa. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. There are no cards in against, so can I ask conference if motion 4, health and well-being census, is passed by acclaim? Well done. We now move to motion number 5, travelling communities, to be proposed by Eva Comrie and seconded by Lee Wilson. Welcome, Eva.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again, conference. This motion was drafted by a lady called Margaret Ann Merrick, and it has the support of several prominent members of the Gypsy Traveller Roma community. And it's something that is long overdue in Scotland. Now, you can log on to the Scottish Government website and you can read laudable aims and priorities to do with all sorts of minority communities in Scotland. And obviously that includes Gypsy Traveller communities. However, in the real world, policies and practices which are supposed to have been long forgotten, outdated and eradicated by equalities legislation, in fact, still remain. And I think that everybody in this room will understand what I say when I refer to the likes of My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, or documentaries about Dale Farm and the likes. there is maintained within the whole of the UK and in Scotland a prejudice towards the Gypsy traveller community. And I speak from personal knowledge. I am not a member of that community, but my first home was in a caravan. So was my second, and so was my third. I lived in caravans, on caravan sites until I was 9.5 years old. But I'm gifted with a very, very long memory. And I remember the teacher in primary 1 who welcomed me in, not knowing where I came from, as if that mattered, and commented on how I looked like a bright child and I had nice, bright blue eyes. And a couple of years later, I had another teacher, I would have been in primary 3 by then, nice lady, who discovered my address, the caravan site down in Broig Road in Crieff, and she said, "Oh, didn't know you came from there." Now, it didn't really matter to me, because I wasn't one of them, I wasn't a gypsy traveller. But by God, how horrible was that for a teacher? But how awful an approach is that towards young children who have done nothing wrong, other than in the eyes of someone deemed to be a professional, were somehow unworthy. That was more than 50 years ago. In some parts of this country, that attitude is maintained. And if we as a party actually mean what we say in our constitution about everybody in Scotland being equal, then by God, that must include every man, woman, and child of every community. And because of my personal experience, I make absolutely no mistake when I say I will promote that community to the ends of this earth. Because that is where these people have often and wrongly been chased. Now, you can drive around Scotland like we do in our nice big motorhome on holiday. It's not our way of life, it's something we enjoy. But it can be very difficult at times to find somewhere to park up, because practically every decent parking space has got a height barrier. Don't you kid yourselves for the reason why those are there. It's not just about tourism. We know, and folk that I grew up with know exactly why those barriers are there. And I'm pleased, on behalf of the Alba Party, to move this motion and to send a message out to the world that Scotland, when it is an independent country and when it is now, as it is, on its way to becoming an independent country, will eradicate every barrier for every minority and every man, woman, and child in this country. I move the motion. Please support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Councillor Lee Wilson to second the motion.
Thank you, Conference. The original seconder unfortunately couldn't be here today, so I've agreed to second on their behalf. It's very interesting, though. I'm very happy to second this motion because it touches on an area of policy that is quite personal to me, actually. Not through direct experience of childhood or growing up, but through my experience as an elected representative in Aberdeenshire. I was actually the first elected member in Aberdeenshire to move a motion at full council supporting supporting a traveller site in my ward in the Mearns. After which, of course, because it was a planning debate and we couldn't comment on planning applications beforehand, but after which a number of members came up to me and commented how brave I was supporting the motion. To which my response was, it wasn't brave at all. It was just simply the right thing to do. These were people who had bought their own land in Aberdeenshire, who had cultivated a beautiful site for themselves, and they were met with resistance from the council at every opportunity, increasingly threatening letters from council officers suggesting that they would be evicted. And in terms of being evicted, I don't need to leave anything to your imagination what that would mean. It would be unconscionable, completely unthinkable. But we moved that motion over 2 years ago now, and they have that land for at least 10 years before it will be renewed, but at least it gives them some reassurance and certainty. But why do I tell you this? I tell you this because my experience in the council is reflected, no doubt, in other areas. And Eva talked about the stigmatism that Gypsy traveller communities face. That's true from individual people, but it's also true from institutions. And until we root that out at every level, we'll never make progress as a society. So I completely agree, and I support the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Lee. There are no cards in against. So can I ask that motion number 5 on travelling communities be passed by acclaim? We now move to, we're almost getting to time now, move to motion number 6 on the agenda, the housing emergency, to be proposed by Hector MacLeod, one of our candidates, and second by Derek Tulloch. Hector MacLeod, welcome. We've been jealously following your campaign and your campaigners.
Good afternoon, conference. Can I start by thanking you and the party to allow me to make a childhood dream of performing at Hampden a reality. It's not quite the World Cup winning penalty, but it's up there. Conference, the situation Scotland has found itself in with housing is shameful and diabolical. Far too many people are living on the streets and worse, dying on the streets due to a lack of affordable housing. We are also losing many communities, cultures and languages, with many being forced to leave rural areas as a result of often being outpriced of properties and no long-term lets available. Conference, all over Scotland, housing is an issue. I believe this motion's 3 calls can be the beginning to address this. The motion's first call is a public register of second homes and homes used for short-term lets be created in order to identify settlements and districts where there are particular pressures. Before I go further, I'd like to make note of 2 things. Firstly, I don't have an issue with anyone who has or can buy a second home. If they're in that position, then it's their right to do so. What I do have an issue with is areas continuing to allow second homes in areas which causes people in those areas unrealistic chances of getting first homes. Secondly, I believe there's 2 categories when we talk of short-term lets. In the first category, you have people who live in the area and are running a B&B or a self-catering for a modest income, or someone who has a family home they wish to keep in the family for children or grandchildren returning back to the area, so they let it out short-term. The second category, I believe you have people who buy up a property to add to their chain of B&Bs and self-caterings, or someone not from the area who just buys a property as a business venture or opportunity. The motion's second call of action is that where pressured areas are identified by the register, all legal and proportionate measures will be employed by local authorities to increase affordable housing supply. The main part of this that I like is that measures will be employed by local authorities. Conference, housing won't be solved with a blanket approach across Scotland. It needs to be different for local authorities to suit their needs in their local areas. We'll solve the housing situation differently up in Skye as to how we'll solve it in Glasgow. We'll solve it differently in Thurso as to how we'll solve it in Edinburgh. The final call of action we call for is that Alba will establish a short-term working group to examine the effectiveness of measures taken elsewhere to increase affordable housing opportunities in areas of high second home ownership, and develop policy to be presented at a future conference. Conference, we have a wealth of talent in our party, and if this motion passes, I would hope that a working group can be set up at the earliest stage possible to instruct all the councillors we're going to get elected in May to use the resources they get to research and advise the working group. Conference, this is only the start, but everything needs to start somewhere. Let's begin to tackle this housing emergency. Conference, I ask you to pass this motion.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Hector. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Hector. And I call our final speaker, Derek Tulloch, to second the motion. Derek.
Good afternoon, conference. Property rights are a fundamental building block of a democratic society. To not be dispossessed or have what is yours removed is a fundamental part of a stable democratic society. So I would like to relate the use of property rights in my part of the world. Now, I grew up looking at the island of Fetlar, which was previously owned by a gentleman called Sir Arthur Nicholson, marvellous fellow, who exercised his property rights by converting 3/4 of the island into a sheep farm, and it's still that same sheep farm. So before Sir Arthur exercised his property rights, the population of Fetlar was 800. It's currently 64. Property rights are a fundamental building block of a democratic society. Unlimited property rights are more problematical, and that is why the motion calls for the creation of a register, because if you're considering depriving a second home owner or a Airbnb owner of the use of their property, you need to have evidence. And local authorities have lots and lots of information, but very little data. So some of this is about creating, the motion asked for the creation of a register and essentially use of proportionate measures. So if you have a second home which you have converted into a fake Airbnb, you should be able to evidence that. And beyond that, public policy works by changing the moral climate. It used to be perfectly acceptable to blow smoke in your baby's face and to drive around absolutely sloshed with no seatbelt on. So public policy works by changing the moral climate. And I would like us get to a position where owning a second home when people don't have first homes is a socially unacceptable act. It is an antisocial act. And the best regulation is self-regulation. So I would ask you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Derek. It's 12:25 and David Henry has sneaked in a card because he knows it's just before 12:30. I'm calling you, David, to speak in favour of the motion on the strict premise that you stick to the time limit, which is 3 minutes. Welcome, David. Starting now come calls from the delegates.
Really short and sweet, actually, this. I'm standing as a councillor in Edinburgh. Housing emergency is all over the country. Edinburgh has had lots of new hotels built, but hardly any new social housing. I've been out on the campaign trail every day for the last 2 to 3 weeks, delivering so far just over 7,000 leaflets myself, which is why I'm getting thinner. So it can be done. Now, this is a message for every potential councillor here. Councils have planning departments. We can use our influence to improve housing. No more student accommodation, no more holiday homes. We want proper homes, affordable homes for ordinary families. So keep that in mind when you get elected to the local councils. Get onto the planning committee. Use the rules within a positive way, and we can improve people's social housing. Vote for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. There are no cards in against motion number 6 on housing emergency. Can I ask conference that the motion be passed by acclaim? Now we move to a highlight in our conference agenda where we hear from the Deputy Leader, and to introduce him, please welcome our party leader, Alex Salmond.
Well, delegates, aren't things going well? Well, that's good because I've got some really bad news. Sad news, I've got to tell this conference there is a split developed in the higher echelons of this party. It's a very personal matter and it's riven. It's a dispute between myself and the Deputy Leader. And I don't think there's going to be any reconciliation because it is a point of principle. Now, if I could express this as fairly and justly as I can. I have the great good fortune to be a lifelong Heart of Midlothian supporter. My deputy has the great misfortune of being a lifelong Hibby. Indeed, if it hadn't been for me saving Hibernian Football Club in the late 80s by taking the hands of Hibs petition into Downing Street, then perhaps Kenny and I would never have been able to coexist in the same political parties. I've been thinking as I've been introducing Kenny, I've been thinking, how could I work in the 2012 Cup final? Taking place in this very stadium, in this very location. You might remember it, Hearts narrowly squeaked by Hibs by 5-1. In this hall, I was speaking to Mr. Laurie Riley, the late Laurie Riley, one of the greatest players ever to play for Hibernian Football Club, then well into his 80s, and me and my dad in particular went up to speak to him, and we got our photo taken, and he was a real gentleman because obviously he was slightly disappointed by the result, but nonetheless, my dad and him talked about the old days in football, how the players now weren't half as good as they used to be, and they were a bunch of wimps or whatever. And so they were talking away, you see, and they got their pictures taken. I was First Minister at the time. We're just up the back there. And as we're going away, I said to my dad, I said, listen, all my childhood, you told me that Laurie Riley was just a poacher who kept Willie Ball, the Hearts centre forward, unjustly out of the Scotland team. Now you've been chatting away to him. My dad looked at me and said, listen, you, Laurie Riley was some player. As you see, there's football rivalry and there's political comradeship. Ladies and gentlemen, delegates, I've got the great pleasure of introducing to you our Deputy Leader, the Member of Parliament for East Lothian. And believe me, Kenny McCaskill is some player.
Thank you, Conference. Well, I've always, will be scarred by 2012, but I always remember that the west sides of the city tend to be the establishment, both politically and indeed in football. The radical policies and the radical teams, they come from the east of the city, and that's how it is. My exploits in the Tartan Army are rather noted, so I won't go into them, but it's a while since I've been here. But during my sojourn from Parliament, when I left the Scottish Parliament in 2016, I was appointed as a chair of the judicial panel. That is the panel that deal with players who have committed misdemeanours or reviewed res cards. Some of the cases were high profile, some indeed, perish the thought, were controversial, but I have to say at least you were guaranteed anonymity. The one thing I came to the conclusion of is Scottish politics I thought was dysfunctional until I found Scottish football, and that was even worse. It's been a while since we met, but sadly the situation is worsening. Our country continues to be under the yoke of a government that we did not elect, a party that has not been elected in Scotland since before even I was born. And yet those who are charged and have been given a mandate to change our constitutional situation and who've been given the elected responsibility of standing up and protecting our people have failed to do so. So we do have to have constitutional change, but we also have to have political accountability, because as well as addressing the sins of Westminster, of which there are far too many for me to name, we have to address those who are failing to deliver and yet are in a position to protect us and who have to be held to account. Now, I've come to this and I feel a bit like the compliance officer, who was usually a lawyer or a former procurator fiscal who came before me in the judicial panel. Because first of all, I'm going to detail some of the sins and misdemeanours that don't rest with Boris Johnson, but do rest with the Scottish Government. And it is our duty and obligation for the cause of independence to hold them to account and to demand that change takes place. Let me first of all deal with ferries in Scotland. Now, listening to the First Minister, it seems a big boy did it and ran away. Now, the big boy apparently was Derek Mackay, but now it's been suggested, in fact, it's Keith Brown. Let's be quite clear who didn't do it. This was not the responsibility of Karl Mack. They didn't want these ships. This was not the responsibility of Jim McCall or indeed of the workforce at Ferguson's, because they were trying to build a ship in which the specifications were changing on almost a daily basis. The blame for this rests with CMAL and with the Scottish Government, who appoint and wholly own CMAL. They are the ones who have to accept responsibility for this. And it is at the present stage a disaster, because we have tenders for ships that should be built on the last yard on the Lower Clyde going to Turkey or elsewhere. We have island communities that are not just struggling to get a service, sometimes for days, if not a week on end, they are bereft of a service. That is simply not good enough. Some of you who maybe still read the papers might have seen that I did raise with CMAL the fact that despite the fact that they don't sail beyond the confines of the Minch, since 2015, they've managed to spend 170,000 on international travel. Now, I don't quite know how they marry that up, but it got worse, because it was drawn to my attention that they're now embarking, the two senior directors, on a booze cruise. I think in the Sun they've described me as perhaps a very naughty boy, but they've gone on a trade cruise from Stockholm to Helsinki. Now let's see who's on that boat with them, in which the charges are going between 2,000 and 4,000. And believe me, when you see the menu and the drinks menu, it is a booze cruise. Who's going? Shipyards from the Baltic. Who else is going? P&O. Who's not going? Karl Mack. Who's not going? Ferguson Marine. Kate Forbes or Jenny Gilruth have to tell CMAL they should not be going on this junket. Enough is enough. Orders for Scottish ships stay in Scotland, and Karl Mack have to be allowed to get on with the job. So let's move on to heating and energy, because we have 1 in 3 people in fuel poverty. Utterly disgraceful. And yet the solution of the Scottish Government, when it is the fact that those who are poorest, those who are most deprived, those dependent on prepayment meters are paying the highest charges, they make sure that the money is spread as largely and widely as possible, so that not just Alec Massey, who said he didn't need the money, I, as a high-paid MP, have been given a discount back because I'm in a Band-D house. We've got people who simply cannot put on their heating and power. They need more than 150 or 200 pounds. They need significantly more, and that should be addressed. But the real issue in Scotland is, how is it that energy-rich Scotland is fuel poor? And we are fuel poor, but we are energy-rich. But lo and behold, just a few months back, we had the great Scott Wind auction. Now, the First Minister, Michael Matheson, Uncle Tom Cobley and all have waxed lyrically about the benefits. Let me, as the compliance officer, run through it. First of all, there was the auction. Now, I have to say, anybody who follows any of my social media pages knows I'm a big fan of animals, and I like watching shows. And I see that they sometimes have auctions. Perhaps Angus, Brendan McNeil or Ian Blackford put their ewes or tops up for auction. And you do see that sometimes people will have a reserve price. So I'm not selling it for less than £1,000. But when they had the Scotland auction, what the Scottish Government was not put a reserve price that the price can't go below. They put a cap on it, so the price couldn't go above. So if you wanted to offer more, the Scottish Government would say, no, don't take any more. We can't take any more. We're not taking any more. That's the maximum. They had been bitten and realised they were initially starting off far too low at something like £10,000. But even increasing it, they only managed to get just under £700 million. Now, that's not to be sniffed at. £700 million, I accept that. But lo and behold, a few weeks later, the United States of America had an auction for what's called the New York Bight. Now, that is an area just off Long Island, off New York, hence the name, in which they put up for auction a quarter of what we put up for auction in the North Sea and around. And you know what they got in America? They didn't cap it. They allowed people to bid as much as they wanted. And so in America, they got $4.37 billion $4.37 billion for a quarter of what we got in Scotland. That isn't just shameful, it is criminal. But the Scottish Government then said, but it's not just the money. It's not just the money, because we're going to get the supply chain jobs. And indeed, Michael Matheson waxed lyrically about the boon fest that would come with the supply chain jobs. So I wrote to him and asking him what you're going to do and how we're going to ensure it. And hot off the press, just yesterday, I got a letter in from him, 25th March 2022. And he says, we're determined to maximise the economic opportunity for the Scottish supply chain from the offshore wind potential ScotWind puts in Scotland. And he goes on to say, our position is that the components parts for the turbines will hopefully, I repeated it, he didn't, but he said, hopefully come from Scotland. That, he goes on to add, we are working hard to attract inward investment while collaborating with the ScotWind leasing round developers, and goes on to say how they did in fact put a requirement within the auction that you had to specify how much we're going to be local supply chain, and that would be a criteria, to be fair. So that's the basis of his hope. But where's the regulation? Because in this country, we have seen what happens when you have light touch regulation. Let's just look at the banks. Allow them to regulate themselves. Gordon Brown and Tony Blair thought there was far too much regulation and we should just let them decide for themselves what they're doing. And that is what's happened in Scotland. I met with one of the major developers and I asked them, well, you've put in this percentage. How are you going to be held to account? Well, they said, we've got to put in an annual return. So the company puts an annual return that says how they're doing against the percentage they said at the outset when they got the award of the tender at the capped price to see whether they're up there. And you have to say, I'm waiting on Michael Matheson coming back to tell me the size of the Scottish Government department that's going to be investigating that. But it'll be very difficult to do it from Victoria Quay. I also asked the lady representative from this major company what happens because her company is buying in turbines from abroad. But they're too big to bring in, so a bit like a Meccano kit, they're going to assemble them at Leith. And I said, how will you apportion that in terms of supply chain work? What will be apportioned to Scotland and what will be apportioned to the Netherlands or Indonesia or wherever they're coming from? We're still to work that out. So presumably the company will work it out. And if it suits them and they want to make it 90-10, then who's going to challenge that? Because after all, they have imposed fines, as Michael Matheson went on to say. They have put in fines. If the companies don't deliver, then they can be fined. The maximum fine is £250,000. But we've got Gordon Martin coming from the RMT this afternoon, and he'll no doubt tell us P&O face being fined. P&O have basically given two fingers to the workers that they are treating disgracefully. The banks faced fines and penalties when they were self-regulated. So the Scottish Government have sold off the ScotWind auction too cheap, and they have failed to specify for the supply chain jobs. But it gets worse, because finally, there's a Great Eastern high voltage cable. It's not just bad once, it's bad twice, because there's a cable that is being laid, and if you ever go down the River Forth, you will see ships out there looking to lay a cable. They're going to take a cable that will run from Torness down to Redcar, northeast England. Another cable is being laid from Peterhead down to another area in northeast England. That will take the energy that comes ashore in East Lothian and in Aberdeenshire, and it will transmit it south. Well, what we're going to do about that? So I wrote to Kate Forbes and I said, who's getting what? And she says, and I got this letter on the 23rd of February, in your letter you asked if Scottish Government, Marine Scotland or Crown Estate Scotland have either sought or will receive payments as a result of the link or for the energy transmitted. And let's remember that just one of these were offshore wind farms, just the Berwick Bank that will come into East Lothian, and it's just one of many. The Berwick Bank alone will provide more power than is required for every household in Scotland. So it's all going to get transmitted south. So I ask, which you might think is a very reasonable question, and the answer for Cape Forbes, the GB energy market is liberalised and power is traded between private commercial businesses. The government could not therefore be in receipt of payment for power transfers across the Eastern HVDC link. Any payments to the Scottish Government or Crown Estate would be in respect of licence and application fees. But why didn't the Scottish Government or Marine Scotland, or indeed give powers to local authorities, simply say, actually, we're in charge of planning, we're in charge of roads, we're in charge of looking after the roads in winter. If you want roads gritted, if you want power supplied, if you want anything done, and having been a government minister, and Alec is a former firm minister knows, governments don't get everything they want, but governments usually get something, because usually a big company will want to keep a government happy. But we have a government that asked for nothing and has got nothing, and the consequence is that the energy that we sold off cheap, that we're not getting to supply chain jobs, is going to be cabled south. I also asked Kate Forbes about supply chain jobs for the cable. And the answer there is, as these are commercial contracts between private companies, we cannot impose any conditions on contracts or subcontracts, as this would be in breach of WTO rules. No attempt to ask for anything, no attempt to enforce jobs. And I can tell you in East Lothian at the moment, the only people who are getting employment are those who run B&Bs or hotels, who have incoming labour, because the transmission site being built near Thornton Loch, it's basically gone to incoming labour from the west of Scotland or the north of England. There is no supply chain firms or businesses. There is no money coming ashore, although, to be fair to Monica Patterson, the chief executive, and I've been supporting her, we would love in East Lothian to be able to replicate with wind what Shetland managed to do with oil. And yet the Scottish Government, who have looked at Shetland, who have praised Shetland, have failed to provide any opportunity for that to be done. So that's the situation that we face. That's a political responsibility, not of Boris Johnson, but of Nicola Sturgeon's government, which is why we've got to hold them to account. They, the Scottish National Party, are failing to do so. What are they doing? Down in Westminster, to fight back against the most odious government we have ever experienced in not just living memory, probably in this century, going back centuries. Well, they've given themselves titles. We've got a shadow chancellor of the Exchequer. Richie Sunak will be quaking in his boots. I've even seen the notepad. It's on the note paper. Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. We've got a shadow spokesperson for Wales and Northern Ireland. That'll impress the international community. I bet President Putin's sitting up taking note. The SNP have got a shadow spokesperson for Wales and Northern Ireland. What a pathetic position to take. We are getting rolled over, kicked about. Our people are being impoverished. We are going to face energy bills that people cannot meet. We are going to face poverty and austerity, the likes of which I never experienced growing up in West Lothian, which was a poor county, even although I was in a fortunate part and quite affluent part. It was a poor county in the 60s and 70s. There was nothing like what we've got at the moment or what is coming down the line. That is why we have to rise to the challenge. It's why we need action. It's why we need to galvanise for the elections. And it's why we need Alba. Because yes, we've got to hold the Scottish Government to account, but in doing so, we've also got to remember that our focus remains on a government in another country that we didn't elect. And until the one that we did elect in this country does its job, this country isn't going to be able to deliver the land that our people need and are entitled to. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much indeed, Kenny. Before we break for lunch and the two fringes, and in light of the fact that one of the fringes in here is on women and equalities, I'm now going to ask that we play the Alba Women's video. Amid this mighty fuss, just let me mention, the rights of women merit some attention. Women have come a long way since Robert Burns' poem of 1792. From Helen Crawford and the suffragette movement to Mary Barber and the rent strikes, our Scottish sisters have been standing up for our rights and to protect the rights of others.
Women are the heart of Scotland, and our contribution to Scottish society is immeasurable. We're the creators, the nurturers, the carers, the innovators, the fighters, the teachers, the inspirers, the pioneers.
However, women in Scotland still struggle for equality, for equal access to education, for equal employment opportunities, for equal support for our health needs. We suffer from sex-based violence and from sex-based inequality, and it's time to change once and for all, to shake things up for women.
If the Scottish Government is so confident in the gender recognition policies that they're trying to bring forward, why is there no debate about it? Why is the debate shut down? And this idea of name calling just for the purposes of shutting down a debate is not what a democratic Scotland looks like. The Alba Party is the only party that will stand up for women and girls' rights. The Scottish Government gender recognition reforms have the potential to endanger women and girls' spaces. That is something that the Alba Party feel needs to be addressed and needs to be discussed. The Scottish Government has recently issued a sex survey to young people in schools. Now, I don't even know of any adult who would be quite happy to answer a survey on their sex life. So why is it okay for young people? And again, we're not seeing any discussion on this. Why is it needed? What is it going to be used for? Where is it going to be stored? And who else has access to that information? The only way to vote to protect women's and girls' rights is to vote for the Alba Party on May the 5th.
The Alba Party will protect and preserve women and girls' rights. We will speak up on all policies which affect us, and we shall not be abused or silenced. The Alba Party will maintain and preserve our sex-based protections as set out in the Equality Act of 2010.
The policy of Alba to solve the problems is that we have a citizens' assembly, because there's obviously a conflict here. And so therefore a citizens' assembly could come to a good solution where everybody would be treated fairly and equally. And that's all we want. But what we do not want is vulnerable women and girls being a prey of predators, being part of male sexual fantasies and being unsafe. And so therefore we need to have a citizens' assembly so all this can be listened to. And our problem's been that the Scottish Government doesn't listen to women's concerns. Our concerns are dismissed as not valid.
So the Alba Party will ensure our female-only spaces such as changing rooms, hospital wards, our toilets, our showers, sleeping accommodation, refuges, hostels and prisons are protected and maintained as ours. The Alba Party will protect our right as women to refuse consent to males entering our single-sex spaces.
Yeah, I'm Eva Comrie. I'm speaking to you from my workplace in Alba in Clackmannanshire. I live and work in the town, and in the town is the high school, Alba Academy. There are girls who go to school there who don't want to share their toilets and their changing rooms or their sports with boys. In this town are many women who have sought legal advice from me or from colleagues because they've been victims of abuse or violence or harassment. These women have had to seek assistance from various women's services, including Women's Aid and the like. I know that these women don't want to have to do anything other than seek advice and assistance from females. They certainly don't want to turn up at a Women's Aid refuge and be confronted with an intact male who says he's female and tells people to leave their bigotry outside on the doorstep. There are other women in this town and in this county and all across Scotland who've been in jail. They've been in police cells and they've served prison sentences. These women do not wish to be housed in a prison where intact males confront them on a daily basis. All of these events are events which will unfold if the Gender Reform Act, as proposed by the governing parties, the SNP and the Greens, is passed in the form in which it's likely to be presented to the Scottish Parliament in a couple of weeks' time. Because what is proposed there is that there's a position whereby males can self-identify as female and then call themselves women and seek access to the single-sex spaces which are currently preserved and protected for women and girls. These are protections we have. These are our legal rights. They are there for our dignity, for the sake of our privacy, for our security, for our safety and for our well-being, and they will not be surrendered by Alba women or by the men who support the Alba party.
The really important point is this. We have a right to organise ourselves as women according to our sex, across a range of cultural, leisure, educational and political activities. We have a right to our single-sex spaces. Women matter. Women matter to Alba. And your sex-based rights will always be preserved and protected by us. And only by us. For Scotland, for women, vote Alba. Conference. Conference. We know what a woman is and we're not afraid to say it. Let's hear it for the women. Let's hear it for the Alba women, women of Scotland. And now with that inspiring note from women, we head into lunch and our fringe meetings. Across the way is the Electoral Commission meeting where lunch is being served and we hear some really important information about the elections. And then here we have a panel debate on women and equalities. We'll see you back here at 2 o'clock sharp. Thank you very much indeed, delegates.
Gender reform and schools.
Because I don't want to get out of my seat.
Just that one. I'll just show
Do you want to
no,
swap
they've only
with me
got
just
two.
now?
Right.
I'll just leave my bag under there.
Yeah,
We'll just move one over.
Which, Alan, what will I title your topic?
And then.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Care.
Yeah. Social care.
Social care.
That takes in fostering as well.
We're all fine.
It's mostly on.
So
what I've dealt with mostly is the.
It's to remind
Single
myself
sex.
of everything.
It's single sex and the fact that it's complex medical needs.
Right.
Because I've also at the end of it, I'm saying there's got to be with exact words. It should be a matter of practice and not request, because a lot of people cannot request.
Got you.
How long will we wait?
Not be very long.
That was good speeches, Eva. You're really barnstorming.
I didn't feel like it, but thank you very much for
No,
saying
you're very, very good. Very good speaker.
Oh, great.
I like the one on travellers.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
No, I'm fine. I'm a bit
What
like.
is it?
Yeah, I don't drink coffee.
I'll take it if you don't mind.
I'm quite
Thank you.
sort of excited. I don't know, like I just feel something's happening.
It's all right. I'm not bothered about anything.
How
You want to go and phone and see what's
quite a
happening?
bit on. You've been doing a lot of work in your ward.
Really,
haven't
really
you?
busy.
It's actually there now.
Aye, it seems to be quite positive so far.
Right.
Invited to, I was doing a local competition yesterday for primary school.
I understand.
Aye, it's been full
You
on.
enjoying it?
Aye,
It's horrible.
It's me living my
Excuse me.
dream. No,
Yeah.
that's what I
Can you
can
get me
do.
the women and equalities policy? Because I can't find it. I had it on my phone and I've lost it.
Well, really, I can't because look, I've got mine on my phone. If I move now, Eva, I'll never find it
What do I
again.
look for?
Women in Equalities is on. God knows. I actually have it on my.
I've got it, but I can't find the bloody thing.
I'm trying to remember. I have it on my computer. My computer's not working because I've left my lead somewhere. I don't know where. My computer. I've got a computer, but it's dead in the hotel, but it's dead because I haven't got a computer lead. Right.
Are you staying in Glasgow just now?
Yeah, in the hotel at Central Station because I travel. I used to. I don't
Do you think there'll
anymore.
be very many folk coming?
Well, oh, Angela.
Or is this just about it?
Yes, Angela. Yeah.
The recordings on this computer.
Oh, sorry. Okay, bye.
Who's that?
The recording's on so they can hear us chatting.
Who can hear the whole world? I think I'll tell some secrets now.
Right, there's recordings on, I
The
think.
recording's still on, folks. Right, do we want to just get started?
Yeah.
Right.
Hold on, but I've lost this now.
Right. Right, folks, I think we'll just get going. And could everybody be mindful because apparently we're still being recorded. So, Heather McLean, you at the front. Heather. Do you not just love giving your teacher a row? Welcome everybody to the Women and Equalities Forum, and I can do no better than read you an excerpt from our policy. The Scotland Alba strives to create and envisions a level playing field where we can become truly equal to each other and where everyone's rights are respected and protected, but vitally not at the cost of the rights and protections afforded to others. So, with no more ado, I'll introduce you to Denise Finlay.
Hi, everyone. So what I just want to quickly talk to you about today is the polling analysis I've done for the GRA, because what I'm hoping is that you can use this information in your council elections for the council election candidates. So the first thing is from the polling analysis. So what there was 3 polls. There were 2 polls carried out by panel base, one for Scots Goes Pop and one for Women Scotland. And there was a poll carried out by Murray Blackthorne Mackenzie that was carried out by Survation. Because we had 3 polls, I could put similar, the questions weren't identical, but I could put similar questions together. And therefore I have what is a reliable, it's reliable, this information from the data. So the first bit of information for you is on familiarity. Now, people in general are not familiar with the reforms at all. And it's quite interesting because in the average familiarity rating is minus 0.10, which means there's 10 percentage points between those that say they are familiar and they have heard of it and those that say that they don't. So most people don't know about the GRA reforms. But the people that are kind of know it a bit most is SNP 2019 voters, younger age group, 16 to 24, and the highest social class A. So they're the most familiar. It varies mostly by age and social class. The younger people have heard of them because the SNP are using this ideological issue, you know, and SNP 2019 voters. So most people don't know, but when people know, they really, really dislike them. So there's negative in across every area. But so the only demographic that is happy with self-ID is 16 to 24. Every other demographic is against. And the 16 to 24 is only like minor, you know, it's like +1. It's not happy. It's like half and half. It's in the margin of error. Every other demographic is very much against self-ID. Males, interestingly, males are more opposed to a self-ID than females by 10 percentage points. So the difference is males are 10 percentage points more likely, are saying they're more likely to be opposed to self-ID. So one of the things that we really have been missing in this whole debate is men. We have, maybe the women won't wish hashtag, you know, and I know it's women that have been organising, and I know it's women that's been carrying the message, and I know it's women's rights impacted, but men are very, very much against this. So actually, you know, getting men on side, thinking of messages for men might, you know, be helpful in the campaign. So don't just focus your campaign on women, you know, focus your campaign on men as well. So there's men, right? Older people are very much against, but older Lib Dem voters, Lib Dems are completely out of touch with their demographic. Sorry.
I just came up to tell you that this is being live streamed.
It's not supposed to have stopped.
Somebody's watching it at home.
No, it's just been sorted.
Yeah. Sorry, it's not been live streamed. Okay, it doesn't matter. The first bit is fine. It was on familiar. This is information that shouldn't. Okay, so if Lib Dems are really out of touch with their voters. Lib Dem voters are as opposed as Tories to this. Yet Tories are in touch with their voters because Tory voters are opposed and Lib Dem voters are opposed. But if you have areas that you know is mainly Lib Dem or Tory voters, then what you should be doing is pushing GRA in those areas. Now, in each of your wards, you'll have some places that are more, you know, it's the Labour SNP fight, and you have some places where it is the Tory Lib Dems. So the Tory Lib Dem areas, one way of maybe you never know, they might put Alba first if they really, really care about this. Sorry. Are we? Oh, is it being streamed? Right, okay. Well, I don't think it's worthwhile doing anymore. Sorry. Didn't know.
If you could bear with us a couple of minutes, please, because there's obviously a serious issue here where something's not working exactly as it was intended to. Could somebody see if they could find Corey Wilson, please? Thank you.
Wasn't know this was going to be recorded, did we?
Corey, the live stream's still going out with us speaking, although it was meant to be off. Okay. Thanks.
There's nothing. It's only I've done this work for us. I don't want everybody to know it. You know? Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's a harm or people know it, but I just don't. But speaking, it's probably struggling out. Yeah.
No, thanks, because I'm already in touch with him. Thanks. Thank you.
I don't know where this is.
Still on.
Well, I'll tell you what you'll just leave it, because I'm sure your bit's going to be fine. Just...
On the basis that we might live, let's not miss out a great opportunity to tell the people what the GR reform actually comprises. So for those who don't know, or for those who think that it should remain a secret, the current law, the 2004 Act, enables somebody with a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and a medical certificate that says so to apply after a period of 2 years of living in the gender into which they transition to then apply for a gender recognition certificate, which in turn, if issued, enables a change of the sex law throughout the UK. The proposal of the Scottish Government is that the need for a medical diagnosis be entirely removed and that the 2-year period be reduced